so many people have, and so many companies have remained successful without having to, bring people back to the office.
So is this a shift in the zeitgeist? I mean, do these downtowns ever come back? Do these high rises ever fill up again? Or have we just changed the nature of work? We've decided, wait a minute, I can get the same stuff done at home and play with my kids. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Silicon Insider podcast. Hey, Scott, how are you?
I'm well, Michael. Good to see you.
You're sitting in the station looking,
Yes,
it looks very 24th century, it's just black
I'm
rectangles.
done for the day and just get to talk to you. So this is how we do it.
Good. Okay, well, let's start with the story of the week. I mean, this was a big story all around the world. 13 state attorney generals, plus the District of Columbia, brought suit against TikTok, essentially claiming that its techniques like push notification, infinite scroll, autoplay, and time maximizing algorithms were having a deleterious effect on America's children. And among the effects, the negative health effects, included disrupted sleep, depression, increased loneliness, loss of analytical skills, memory formation, contextual thinking, conversational depth, empathy, and increased anxiety. Now, my first reaction was that sounds like a description of the entire Zoomer generation. Uh, but also, it's not like TikTok's doing this in isolation. I mean, social networking companies have been using casino techniques and attention gathering techniques now for 40 years. Why TikTok?
I think the one word answer is China. If you think about it, yes, there are other apps, particularly Instagram, where they have used the A words, not only anxiety, but addiction. And those have come into play with this TikTok suit, claiming anxiety and addiction of young people, which I don't think is that far of a reach. I think we've got lots of evidence of that. But you think about TikTok, President Biden signed a bill saying that TikTok would be banned in America if it didn't spin off from its parent company, which is Chinese, the company ByteDance, and that could happen sometime early next year. So both sides of an otherwise really sharply divided nation seem to agree here in America that TikTok is something we need to worry about. Why they worry about it more than the other social media companies, I think, comes down to concerns that the Chinese government may have access to our data and our children's data.
Well, I understand that and I agree with it. And I'm very concerned about it. But there's two arguments, and what TikTok made one of them, which was basically the United States government also surveils all of us. So what's the big deal? And secondly, we've said that we don't share this stuff. You don't believe us, but we don't. And you've been doing this, you've been chasing us for all these years. I mean, people forget President Trump initially banned TikTok, and then Biden rescinded that order and then immediately put it back on when he realized, when he heard from the CIA, Congress has already voted to do it, and TikTok says they're going to do it. Now, one thing that bothers me is why have we taken so long to realize this stuff is threatening? I mean, most of the people signing the laws and the attorney generals were probably gamers in their youth experiencing the same thing. We must have all known. We never had a great conversation on what is the impact of this thing. And now, it's hitting us in the face.
I mean, I would say we have had some good conversations about this as the lawmakers have gotten more hip to what's going on. Remember, the last time Mark Zuckerberg was up on Capitol Hill, he was all but ordered to turn around and face the parents of those whose youngsters have been damaged in many ways, scary ways, by Instagram. And he apologized to them. We know what's going on here. When Mark Benioff says that social media is like the new cigarettes, he's not kidding. There's an addiction, there are health concerns, there's anxiety concerns. We know these things to be true. I just don't know why nothing has been done about it. Is it because these companies are so big and powerful and making so many people so wealthy? Is it that government feels powerless? But getting back to TikTok, there is a specific reason. Yes, America may surveil its citizens for data, but that's different from China collecting American data. And that I think we still have to remember is one of the reasons that both sides of the aisle are so against TikTok. But yeah, social media has been problematic for years. We've known about it. It has sometimes flared up, as in the Cambridge Analytica scandal, as in 2016.
Well, the Wall
But
Street
for
Journal
whatever reason,
damage being done to girls. That was
exactly.
alleged.
Right. But for whatever reason, nothing has been done about it except complaints and sort of suggestions, on how to curb these things. I mean, we had, a cutoff each night for our daughters when it came to phones in general, not just social media, and age gating. We waited until they were of a certain age, and I don't know that in the long term will have been proven to work, but at least in the short term it did. And but yeah, we know how bad these things are. We know what these companies are doing to young people.
Um, Interesting question. There's a lot of people now resisting. I mean, you heard from them, I'm sure, at the station, that you can't stop TikTok now because we've built an entire economy around TikTok. There's a whole ecosystem. And so you say, well, it's pernicious, it's damaging the kids, and people go, okay, but half my business now is on TikTok. You can't make it go away. And these are not 18-year-olds saying this. These are the 30-year-olds that have moved on to TikTok as well. How do you, I mean, maybe the solution is, sorry, TikTok, you either break up, you either divorce from your parent company, from ByteDance, or you're gone. But there'll be a tremendous hue and cry if that happens, if they don't do it.
Right, but we're waiting for that to happen because remember, both sides of the aisle approved it. President Biden signed the bill. Unless there's a divestment, TikTok goes away. You're right in saying we don't know that we're 100% sure that we'll see that, but that has been what the lawmakers have decreed. And as far as people who do make money on TikTok and are influencers on TikTok, that's legitimate. I get it. But there were those on MySpace and they moved on. There were those on other platforms. And I think it's a downside of doing business on these social media networks that you may run into one that is so unpopular for so many reasons that it is forced to go away or at least, have a smaller reach. And to that, I would just say, sort of lay the groundwork to be somewhere else. Remember when Elon Musk was threatening to throw journalists off of Twitter? I had a lot of people come to me and say, whoa, you've got a big audience and a big reach. Hey, how about checking out Instagram or how about checking out, Mastodon? And that was just sort of the way people thought was people, especially young people, are malleable enough where they can go somewhere else. And then, yeah, we'll still have these issues, but it may not be with the company that everybody seems to be worried about.
So what are the attorneys generals doing of these 13 states? And these are bipartisan. They're Republicans, Democrats, independents. Right. They come from little states in the South and the North and the giant states like California. Are they just, my sense is they're drawing a line in the sand in order to enable their citizens to bring suit for damages against TikTok.
Possibly. I don't know exactly how that chain works. If an attorney general sues, can it become sort of a class action thing? I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised if any and or all of these suits are successful if individuals and families start to bring similar lawsuits saying, hey, you addicted my kid, you caused my kid anxiety. And then it's really, I mean, who knows where that goes and how these social media companies may have to change their way of doing business in order to protect those who can sue them.
Well, we even have a couple claimed deaths, like one kid who just studied how to ride trains and was killed not too long ago. So, I mean, I could see this becoming a gigantic class action suit, and with children even protesting. I mean, if you want to know how much kids have been made into junkies by TikTok, look at their response to the threat of TikTok disappearing.
Yeah. Sure, that makes sense because they really like it. And Although some are saying, wow, this is causing me anxiety and it's an addiction. Many others are saying, hey, this is cool. This is how I socialize. This is something that is important to me, and I get it.
Okay, next. The stock market has pulled back a little bit. The consumer price index rose this week for September by 2.4%. Not good, but on the other hand, inflation had a pullback thanks to falling gasoline prices and some moderation in the inflation of housing. So we're still kind of, though I'm seeing more and more people saying, no, we're actually in a recession. We never recognize it when we're in it. And we're beginning to pull out. There's still some trouble spots, such as groceries and car insurance. And the groceries one seems to have, it's going to play a critical role, it looks like, in this coming election, because people aren't happy about grocery prices, and no matter how much they're told that it's not as bad, it's a lot better, they still seem to feel the pinch. So yeah, let's see. Yeah, prices slowed on houses, and we're kind of in this interregnum now. Everybody's waiting until after the election. The Fed cutting rates seem to have had a little bit of effect on inflation, which is good. And if they do it again, maybe we'll get a little bit more. What do you think? Where do we stand now? I feel like we've been caught in this, a world of mixed signals for a long time. It's kind of like purgatory. We don't know if we're going to heaven or hell.
I think that's way overstating it. I think that's what we
Well,
call.
I always overstate it.
I mean, this is the economy. I mean, our economy changes, it ebbs, it flows. But I mean, I don't understand any talk of a recession, frankly. Look, step one, I'm not an economist. I just talk a good game by interviewing a lot of people. But jobs numbers after job numbers, we continue to create jobs through all of this. And that's the best news of all. And yes, job numbers higher, wage numbers higher. It makes sense that prices would go up. By the way, it wasn't all that long ago that we were sending, I don't know, billions of dollars into the economy because of the pandemic and to make sure that people were able to keep their jobs and keep buying groceries. And when you put that much money into the economy, you are not only often causing inflation, you're begging for it. So of course that happened. And yet, what's inflation at now? Barely above 2%. What's our stock market at? Record highs. What are we still doing? Creating jobs. Oh, we're also still complaining about the economy. I'll let other people explain that. Look, I get it.
First time unemployment claims.
Yeah, they're up a little bit, but not even all that much. I mean, the job numbers.
We're not in the pangs of a recession, but we're not in a real expansion mode either.
No, but that would be tough to do given that, I mean, look at what's facing companies right now, a hiring binge that they're just coming out of, and all these concerns about AI, which, while creating some jobs, after all, there's some startups and companies hiring because of it, it's almost a pause by companies that are wondering, what about my back end positions? Are they going to be taken over by these machines that I will have to pay money for? And therefore, can I even afford to hire there? There's this sort of weird pause when we try to figure out what AI means to the job number, in terms of hiring versus firing versus, adding machines that are expensive and still uncertain as to what those machines will, give our economy and give the workforce. So there's a lot of uncertainty out there, but some of that uncertainty is because of new technology, because of innovation, because of job creation. So a lot of our economy is really humming along fine. But let's not forget, that's often when we get ahead of our skis and do dumb things like in 2008 or 1929, and that's when things go south. We're not there yet, obviously, but I think we do have to be careful, largely because of all this technology on the horizon.
Well, nature hasn't been our friend lately either.
No, right.
But the question is, do natural disasters like these two hurricanes, are they a net positive over time? I mean, short term, it's a huge amount of money that's been lost.
Right.
but the rebuilding is oftentimes, I think, good for the economy.
I mean, often, yes,
You're upgrading the capital plant of the entire Southeast right now, and you'll be doing that for
well,
the next few years. That's a lot of expenditures.
right. Okay. But let's remember the disaster in the Gulf with the oil leak. That cost jobs, that cost the economy. And yes, eventually they were able to do some rebuilding and tourism was, coming back, but that took time. And so I don't even know if we have any idea of just how much damage was done to Florida. I mean, you'd see the maps and just how much of the state was covered by these
Well, amazingly,
catastrophic
the
storms.
eastern part seemed to have more damage than the western part where it hit because of all the tornadoes. Who would have thought you'd have 80 tornadoes surrounding a hurricane?
Right. So we're going to have a lot of damage. We'll have job losses. So much government money and your tax money will have to go towards rebuilding. But right, that's what America does after disasters. It rebuilds, it creates jobs, but this could take a while. And I hate to use the term net positive for something like this because I mean lives are lost and people are displaced by the thousands, and that's just frightening, and it will stay that way, I'm afraid, for quite some time.
And traumatic. I mean,
Yes.
these guys are going to take a long time to get over this. We also have strikes. We deferred the longshoreman strike, but it's coming back with a vengeance in January. And that's a little bit frightening. And we have Boeing, which doesn't seem to be resolved or heading towards resolution. Anyway, interesting times. One last thing I'll throw in. Office vacancies are at a record high in the Bay Area. Now, part of that is, as we've talked about, companies are trying to physically downsize. So they're abandoning buildings. There's been a few big deals, like Applied Materials just bought the old Fry's superstore in Sunnyvale, but still, it's a record low in terms of what record high of vacancies. What do you make of that?
I mean, I think it's just been so slow to turn around in places like downtown San Francisco. And we need to see, I guess, prices go even lower. And we need to see even more companies bring people back to the office before that turns around. You know, this has happened as the job numbers have actually grown. I mean, we've seen some layoffs, certainly, but
Yep.
overall, job growth, even while fewer people are going downtown. And I've seen it in other downtowns. It's not just the Bay Area and tech. You'll see vibrant communities of people going to cafes again and going to restaurants again and traveling again and staying at work, but in their homes. And so then you venture to the downtown and you still see like boarded up windows. And downtown may be the longest term casualty of the pandemic, just in that so many people have and so many companies have remained successful without having to bring people back to the office.
So is this a shift in the zeitgeist? I mean, do these downtowns ever come back? Do these high rises ever fill up again? Or have we just changed the nature of work? We've decided, wait a minute, I can get the same stuff done at home and play with my kids and go out and walk in the garden.
Yeah, it's a good question because I don't think, I cover tech more than anything else, so I can't really speak on other industries, but tech really didn't suffer because of the pandemic, or I should say, because people worked at home. It didn't suffer because people worked at home. They still made their numbers. The stock prices did fine. Investors were pleased. They hired a lot of people, et cetera. So they didn't have to go back to the office. They didn't have to commute. And yeah, I think we're looking at work in a different way. I don't know that we've had enough time to decide if, this is a permanent thing or not. But at least for tech, things are looking different. I have seen, on LinkedIn sort of job descriptions and offers where, it's like a feature to say you can work at home.
Yeah,
And people
remote.
like it.
I'm amazed how many job openings right now have remote on them. And I
Yeah.
think one of the advantages is not just the overhead question and all of that. You can hire people that are 2,000 miles away. So why
Well, right. And remember the sort of killer app if you're trying to be a startup that's growing and competing against the big guys. used to be, let's say, on-site daycare, or maybe, hey, free meals in our international cafeteria. And those are all great things. But what people really want is a little more work-life balance and flexibility. And so that may be the new killer app as companies like Amazon and Salesforce, the real the big companies bring people back to the office and demand that they come back to
Yes,
the office.
holding a gun to their head.
If you're
But
a smaller, more nimble company that says, gosh, how can I get an advantage on those big guys? You're going to say remote work if you want it. And people, I think, will respond to that.
yeah, and I think a lot of people work for those big companies have, escaped and they've now seen the promised land. And they're not
Yeah.
coming back over the River Jordan, not not to Egypt. They love being in this new countryside where they get to, you know, go down to the local Starbucks and hang out and do all their office work. So
Expected
we'll
you to
see.
break out into let my people go right there.
Let my people go. Yes. Okay. Elon Musk. He's now, I guess, well, we're recording. I think by on Friday we're going to know. We'll see it on the. Well, you'll be covering on late night news. Maybe Elon's going to finally introduce his self-driving vehicle, his robo taxi or
Right.
whatever.
As you and I speak, it's just about to start. Well, you never really know when a Tesla event is about to
Yeah,
start.
no, it doesn't. And in fact, all the coverage said, yeah, he says he's going to introduce it tonight and it'll be available by the end of the year. Everybody's skeptical. The market went down a little bit on Tesla because it's like he said it too many times. He's made too many promises and set dates. He's like the worst boyfriend in the world. He never shows up for dates. Um, so anyway, he's supposed to introduce this self-driving vehicle, and it's going to be the challenge to Waymo, which is Alphabet's self-driving car. Have you driven Waymo?
I've been driven in a Waymo. Yes. Yes. Did
My,
the
my son and
self-driving.
his girlfriend, my son and his girlfriend just did it in San Francisco last weekend. They loved it. It's
Yeah.
so easy, and they felt really safe. It wasn't like this thing was making it up as it went along. It knew the route. It was constantly aware of everything around it. I think they felt safer in it than they would driving themselves in San Francisco.
Yeah, a lot of people say that where they feel safer than an unknown, a stranger driving them, and that's why some people will take them. And there's the cool factor. Cruise, I think, got a little bit ahead of itself and had a lot of accidents and a lot of problems and shutdowns. But Waymo has been much more consistent, and I think people are pleased with that. I think one of Musk's problems, not only that he keeps promising and not delivering, but is that Waymo has been out there for a while fairly successfully. And we don't really know the finances of this. And Tesla, of course, everything it does, because it's a publicly traded company, sort of gets looked at that way. And I don't know if we know that this is a big cash cow for Tesla if it puts these robo taxis on the road, or if it's just
Well,
sort of another step.
Musk is saying, oh, this technology could boost Tesla's market value to as much as $30 trillion. 30
Right. And
times. Well, yeah, sure.
right. And we don't know that. And that doesn't, I don't know. I'm not a numbers guy either, but that doesn't make a lot of sense right out of the box. And he has been known to exaggerate, and that's the understatement of the year. But regardless of Musk and time and money and exaggeration, the idea of sort of a robo taxi thing, like you just said, with your son and his girlfriend, they're catching on. People of all ages seem to appreciate it and enjoy it. And it may be with gradual steps the way we get around in the future. And so,
I
yeah,
think Tesla's current driverless technology is what, a level 2, and Waymo's is running at level 4 now, which is a really high level of, unassisted driving. We'll see. I mean, there's that kind of magic fairy dust around the Tesla name. So it's very possible that cities will just, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. That was the old rule in the 60s and 70s. If you're going to buy an electric car, most of the other ones have either left the business or they're going bankrupt. People buy Teslas. Now, would the average person prefer the cyber taxi? right now, or would they prefer that new low cost budget Tesla that's been promised?
Right. The sort of the Model 2, as some people call it. And right, I think a lot of people out there, investors and maybe those like myself who just want to see more EVs on the road would say, is a robo-taxi really where we need to go? Or do we just need to see more EV models that are more affordable so that more of us can drive them? And I hope that's part of the plan too. And that could be hinted at tonight. Musk is a showman. And when I say hint, I mean he could say three or four things that we won't see for a decade, but eventually, like the Cybertruck, they do arrive and we're off.
We'll see. I've noticed a lot of Cybertrucks lately, and all of a sudden they've become a lot less interesting, I noticed. I mean, you see the first one, you go, good Lord, that's quite something. But now they look kind of big and lumbering. They seem to be going slow even when they're going fast because they're so
Interesting.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, so supposedly the global opportunity for robotaxis is 1.7 trillion dollars by 2040. I think that's actually a realistic number. I could see entire fleets of these things. We'll see what happens when the taxi drivers unions in these big cities suddenly find themselves completely superfluous.
Right. And that they've already been fighting.
Yeah, we're going to see some strikes and all sorts of stuff, sabotage.
Right. Well, they've been fighting with Uber for years, and Uber is just you driving your car, instead of a taxi. And
Uber dead.
Right, imagine just eliminating the driver. That's going to be sort of two strikes against the taxis.
And with some of the bad news that's happened over the years about Uber drivers, is Uber dead if this thing takes off?
I don't think so. I think Uber adapts it if it takes off.
Yeah.
Look at Uber's stock over the last few months. I think people are, for whatever reason, suddenly jumping on that bandwagon. And Uber has I imagine, not only watching this robotaxi stuff closely, but maybe even thinking this could be their future as well.
Yeah, which would be not a bad system. Let the Waymo and Tesla build these things, but then let Uber buy them, like big fleet purchases. That could be a nice, sympathetic system.
Well, I don't think it's very sympathetic to drivers, but look, we're already in this world
not
where,
for drivers.
Yeah, AI and machine learning is threatening to take over, heck, many of our jobs. And then you add in all these robo taxis. What happens to the truck drivers? What happens to the Uber drivers? What happens to the taxi drivers? There could be an inflection point soon. I realize this stuff is taking a long time to roll out, but there's a lot of concerned people, worried about how they're going to put food on the table in the near future, I think.
Well, remember Moore's law. All new technology takes longer than predicted, but arrives quicker than we're prepared for. And I think you're going to look up and realize, wow, everything's changed. And, this is going to have some important labor questions and everything else. We'll see. Okay, Morgan, well, if you didn't buy your house when we told you to, you're already too late. Mortgage rates spiked in the biggest 1 week jump since April. They rose sharply last week. Average rate on a 30-year fixed rate loan jumped to 6.32% for the week, up from 6.12. And average 15-year loans rose from 5.41 to 5.41 from 5.25. The mortgage rates are going up again. We'll see. I mean, housing prices are going down, but now mortgage rates are going up.
I mean, yeah, I think the trend has been down. Interest rates are now dropping. Mortgage rates often follow interest rates lower. But yeah, it's going to be a bumpy ride. And it has been a bumpy ride for a long time for anyone trying to buy a house around here.
Yeah, well, it's always a bumpy ride around here. I've been looking at houses under $1 million.
Probably doesn't take you very long to find them. I mean, there aren't that many.
Yeah, but they're not. They're in corners of Silicon Valley. They're not where you think they're going to be. They're next to freeways and that sort of thing. It's pretty hard to find anything under $1 million around here. So, anyway, finally, during its iPhone 16 event last month, Apple confirmed that iOS 18.1 will be released in October, but it didn't give a specific day. We now know the specific day. It's October 28th. And it's going to have some Siri enhancements, including improved understanding for both follow-up requests and when you stumble over your words, like I've done through this entire conversation. Writing tools for rewriting, summarizing, and proofreading, notification summaries, suggested reply in messages and mail apps, and a new cleanup tool in photo apps that you can take that no good brother-in-law of yours out of the photograph, and you can create a memories movie in the Photos app by typing a description. That sounds kind of cool. I think that's my favorite one. And then transcription summaries for phone calls. So you don't even have to get on the phone call. It'll just talk to whoever you're talking to and transcribe the conversation. What do you think? Is that enough of a leap? I mean, everybody's got to buy it anyway, but did they do good? You're the Apple guy.
Yeah. And I still think these changes are incremental. And if that's what AI, Apple Intelligence gives us in this big rollout, I don't think it's enough. It's not enough to justify the newest phone. It's not enough to say, wow, OpenAI should be a $157 billion company. There needs to be more, and maybe we just don't know what that more is yet. But if it's, I don't know, better cataloging of your photos, that's cool. That already exists. If it's removing people from the background, it's cool, but it already exists on Android phones. And, a better Siri, come on. We just need more. And I think the sort of I don't know, the killer app here may be the app developers themselves. For my money, the most...
Won't they crowdsource some cool app?
Apple always does. They always do a really good job of it. They have people who sincerely are good at what they do and want to improve these phones. And so maybe saying, okay, we've got AI, go nuts. Make it the consumer product that we think you all need. Because so far, I think most consumers are just not convinced.
Yeah, it's not there yet. There's some app out there that's going to change the world. And maybe some code writer sitting in, I don't know, Botswana, for all we know, is working on it. And it'll change everything. But right now, it just seems like we're just inching forward.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue the phones were cool.
Yeah.
The App Store changed everything. And so if we're going to somehow make this great leap forward in phones that are already well established as solid phones, it's got to be something that turns AI into a consumer must-have thing. And I don't think that's there yet.
I think you're right. Okay, that's it for now, folks. You'll find us on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. You can see Scott on Facebook and X, and of course, almost every night on NBC Bay Area. And you can hear me regularly. In fact, I am going to become a regular on the World Radio Show, BBC World Radio Show, Business Matters. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.